So let me begin with bridge building. Here I'm going back to what I talked about right at the very beginning of the first lecture, the idea of bridging Ivory Tower and Main Street. There are many people in academia, outside of academia, who divide the world essentially into two. They talk about the real world that is outside, that is dirty, impure, profane, versus academia, which is lofty, idealistic, sacred. Sacred versus the profane. This distinction hurts. Hurts academia and hurts people who are outside of academia. Alfred North Whitehead, the philosopher, the careful shielding of a university from the activities of the world around us is the best way to chill interest and to defeat progress. Celibacy does not suit a university. It must mate itself with action. This is very important for a university. Sheldon White, who was my thesis advisor as an undergraduate here, talked about a second psychology. And he said a second psychology is a psychology that leaves the labs, that draws on research done in the labs, that is important and meaningful, however, doesn't only focus on that. It goes out to the outside world, interacts, gets its hands, its mind dirty, does work outside, and then applies its work, and then learns from the quote-unquote dirty experiences and brings it back to the lab, and so on in an upward spiral. He calls it the importance of a second psychology, which is what Alfred North Whitehead is also talking about. Now, you may be sitting here, and most of you are not going to go into academia. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, fine, so university, academia must mate itself with action. What does it have to do with me? How is this relevant to me? Not only is it relevant to you, it has everything to do with you. And here is why. What the world needs more than anything else is practical idealists. For 6 years, I was a resident tutor in Leverett House when I was a graduate student, and then also when I started to teach. And what struck me most about conversations that I had either in Leverett, in other houses, with students is their sense of mission, your sense of mission, your desire to do good, to make the world a better place. And as I followed many of the students after they graduated, whether students who were with me here as undergrads or students whom I tutored, when I followed the paths, it wasn't just empty words. These students went ahead and did wonderful things, whether it was right out of college, whether it was once they established themselves. But there was always this in the back of their mind, very often the fore of their minds. How can I make this world a better place? Passionate, idealistic, good, in the deepest sense, good. This desire to make a difference, common to just about all students. There are many people who talk about this generation as the me generation. All I care about, all this generation cares about is, well, let me just make more money, let me just get a bigger house, let me just be more successful and accrue more accolades, more prestige. This is a false stereotype. Yes, accolades, prestige, money is important. It's important to most people in the world. Big deal. But for these people who have these stereotypes, where they err is that they see just that, and they don't see the desire to make a difference. You know that 1,800 students at Harvard each year, above 1,800 students, are members of PBHA. That's not all. There are other students who are outside PBHA and who volunteer. Just about every single one of you, at least if we look at statistics, just about every single one of you, very soon, after you leave Harvard, will join an organization, whether it could be your primary job or not, an organization that is a social enterprise, a not-for-profit, something to better the world. You'll be on boards of such organizations. You'll donate money to such organizations. Harvard grads are generous with their time, with their money, with their efforts. Whether they're at the business school, the law school, college, med school, ed school, you give a lot because you care. Again, whether it's money, whether it's time, usually both. False stereotypes. There's also false stereotypes about Americans. Americans, empirically speaking, just like speaking empirically about Harvard students and looking at the trends and the statistics, empirically speaking, Americans are the most generous people in the world. Not just because they have more money to give. Yes, Americans have more money to give, and they give a lot more money. Whether it's in food, whether it's in medical aid. Americans also spend the most time, and this is research done at Dartmouth, Americans spend the most time out of any other people in the world volunteering, an average of 4 hours a week. Volunteering outside of their job, which may also have a social objective, more than any other people in the world. Once again, false stereotypes about this wonderful country. And this is wonderful. This is wonderful to see, wonderful to be here. Whether it's at Harvard, whether it's in America, a real privilege. You see, many of you, not far from now, not a long time, you will be in influential positions where you will be able to do a lot of good in a for-profit organization, not-for-profit organization, on the board of your previous school, with your money, with your time. However, and here is the however. I've met many grads who were students with me, or students when I was a tutor, who expressed their frustration to me. Said to me, you know, I had all the good intentions in the world. I have all the good intentions in the world. I want to do good. I've donated my time, my money, but I feel that something is missing. I feel that I've fallen short of my potential to really make a difference. Why? Because goodwill and idealism, while necessary, they're not sufficient. Not enough. Because very often, with very good intentions, we may fall short of what we're capable of doing, or, in some situations, even hurt more than help. And we'll look at some of these studies, hopefully still today, where very good intentions actually hurt more than they helped. Psychologists for decades had very good intentions about helping at-risk population. A lot of money, millions and millions of dollars went into that. With very little effect. Why? Because they didn't also ask the question that they needed to ask, which was, in that particular case, the salutogenic question. Why do some individuals succeed despite unfavorable circumstances? There were very good intentions before this question was asked. There was a lot of idealism. It wasn't enough. And very often, some of these interventions engendered the passive victim mentality as opposed to the active agent mentality that Marva Collins instilled, that programs by Karen Rivich and Marty Seligman instill. And this is where psychology can help. You see, because we can take the research and apply it. We can take this research and apply it, which goes back to the point why it's so important to bridge Ivory Tower and Main Street. Most of this research is not applied. So, for example, how many teachers working in the classroom day in and day out know about the Pygmalion effect. The Pygmalion effect that we're going to talk about next week or the week after shows how teachers' expectations are self-fulfilling prophecies. And if we have high expectations, if we see the seed of greatness in the student, that seed of greatness is much more likely to flourish. Whereas if we don't appreciate it, it will depreciate, wither and die. Not many teachers know about these studies and how they create, through their beliefs, a self-fulfilling prophecy when it comes to their students. How many teachers know about Marvel Collins? Every teacher in the world on the first day of teacher training needs to learn about Marvel Collins and the Pygmalion effect. They don't do that. How about this? Self-esteem. How do you increase self-esteem? If I had to do a poll here, most people guaranteed would say, praise people. Praise people, praise children, it will enhance your self-esteem. Right, partially right, and if it's taken as the whole truth and nothing but the truth, it's detrimental. Because there's a lot of research that shows that when we praise people indiscriminately, we're actually, in the long run, potentially hurting them more than we're helping them. Whether it's their well-being, as well as their success. But the self-esteem movement mostly says, praise people, praise children all the time. And again, that's important. But it's also important to know how to praise. How many people are familiar with the work of the Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck? Well, you're going to be familiar with it in a few weeks. Idealists, many idealists with good intentions are not. And they continue to support or to practice self-esteem as indiscriminate praise, ultimately hurting more than helping. How many psychologists, or how many interventionists with good intentions are familiar with the work of Albert Bandura on self-efficacy and how you cultivate that? Not enough. And very often more harm than good is created. How many psychologists are familiar with this new emerging field of the mind and body? How many know about the studies that show, for example, that yoga practice diminishes significantly, more than any other intervention that they tried, the likelihood of second-time offenders when they practice it in jail? After they're released, they're much less likely to return to jail if they did some yoga there. Strange, but true. How many people know that, and this is connected to my first point, that doing meditation actually literally transforms our brain, making us more susceptible to positive emotions and more resilient in the face of painful emotions? How many people know that 3 times a week, physical exercise, 30 minutes each time, has the same effect as our most powerful psychiatric drugs? 3 times a week for 30 minutes. How many psychologists or psychiatrists prescribe, run 3 times a week and come see me in the morning? Not enough. That's practical idealism coupled together. How about in conflict resolution? The dominant theme of most people with good intentions who want to resolve conflict is, let's get the people together, let's get them to talk, and they and we will live happily ever after. Well, we have research from 1954, those of you who have taken social psych, Muzaffar Sharif, showing that the contact hypothesis, which is just get people to talk to one another, doesn't work. In fact, very often it worsens the situation. Very often the conflict actually gets worse as a result of just getting together and talking. That contact is not enough. That what you need, in the words of Muzaffar Sharif, and later elaborated on by Elliot Aronson, what you need is a superordinate goal, a goal that you have to carry out together, that you cannot do by yourself. Carry out together with a conflicting group. And that's how, over time, you resolve conflict, not just bringing people together. Now, as you can imagine, this is very close to home for me, because there were many people on both sides of the Arab-Israeli conflict who wanted to end it. Many people in this country who wanted to end it. So what did they do? Let's just get them together. Let's get them in a room, whether it was in Camp David or whether it was in Oslo or in Egypt. Let's just get them together to talk, to resolve their conflict and the issue, and then we will all live happily ever after. What happened? The situation worsened. Now, we have the data. We've known that. You know, Muzaffar Sharif showed that in 1954, that is the most likelihood outcome of just contact hypothesis, of just getting them to be together. And there were many people trying to resolve the conflict, and not just in the Middle East, elsewhere in the world, with very good intentions, but very often making inadvertently the matters worse. Idealism and good intentions are not enough. We need to merge, to mate the research with the practice. And this is where you come in. This is where you come in, taking it seriously. Now, when I say take it seriously, there is a problem here, because sometimes research doesn't deliver good news. It would be much easier and nicer if we could just simply get Israelis and Arabs together and the conflict would end. It would be much nicer, easier, smoother. It would be much easier if we could just cultivate children's self-esteem by giving them positive feedback, telling them how wonderful they are. It's easy to do, right? It feels good, they feel good, we feel good, but in the long run it doesn't help if it's only that. Much easier. And research very often delivers bad news, saying it's not enough, the contact. It's not enough to praise. And then people choose, subconsciously, not consciously, subconsciously, to ignore the research and go with their heart. And that's important, to go with the heart, but it's important to go with the heart and the mind. Imagine if an aeronautics engineer woke up in the morning and said, you know, the law of gravity thing really makes things difficult for me. It's a pain. You know, things would be so much easier without the law of gravity. The design would be simpler. And he designs an airplane that ignores the law of gravity. What kind of airplane machine would he or she design? A failure. An aeronautics engineer takes into consideration reality. And reality, there is the law of gravity. We deal with that. Similarly, what research shows us is reality, what's out there, what's working and what's not working. And we need to conform to it, take it into consideration. And it's up to you to take responsibility for that, to bridge the ivory tower and Main Street. You who are being exposed in 32 classes throughout your Harvard career to the most rigorous thinking on different topics, have to take it and apply it. Whether it's in psychology, whether it's in economics, obviously in engineering or computer science, where it's done much more readily than in the social sciences and the humanities. It's important to take responsibility because no one else is going to do it for you. No one is coming.